The thing wearing my friend's face smiled at me from across the frozen lake, but I was looking at Tyler's corpse lying in the snow at my feet. I'm a wilderness survival instructor. I've spent the better part of a decade teaching people how to stay alive in places that don't care whether they live or die. I've pulled hypothermic hikers out of ravines, talked down panicked campers during blizzards, and once spent 3 days tracking a lost kid through the Adirondacks. I know fear. I know cold. I know what the wilderness can do to the unprepared. But nothing in my training prepared me for what happened in the Boundary Waters that October. It started as a simple trip. 6 clients, 5 days, late season camping in Minnesota's Boundary Waters canoe area wilderness. The group was experienced enough. No rookies. Tyler Hammond, my co-guide and friend of 12 years, Sarah and Michael Chen, a married couple from Minneapolis who'd done this route twice before, and brothers named Greg and Austin Powell, both Eagle Scouts in their early 20s. We launched from the Sawbill Lake access point on October 23rd. The weather forecast called for cold but clear conditions, temperatures hovering just below freezing at night. Perfect for what I called character-building camping, cold enough to be challenging but manageable for anyone with proper gear. The first day was routine. We paddled north through a chain of small lakes, the water dark and still as oil, portaging our canoes over narrow trails thick with pine needles. The forest was quiet in that particular way it gets in late autumn, most of the birds gone south, leaves already fallen, everything holding its breath before winter truly arrived. We made camp on the western shore of Alton Lake around 4 in the afternoon, plenty of daylight left to set up tents and gather firewood. The campsite was one I'd used dozens of times before, a small clearing with a stone fire ring and enough flat ground for 3 tents. While the others unpacked, I walked the perimeter, checking for widowmakers, dead branches that might fall during the night, and making note of the nearest water source. That's when I found the first strange thing. About 50 yards from our campsite, just beyond a thick stand of spruce, I discovered another camp, or what was left of one. A single tent, forest green, still standing but sagging slightly. The flap hung open. Snow from an earlier cold snap dusted the ground around it, and as I approached, my boots crunching softly, I felt something tighten in my chest. "Hello," I called out. "Anyone here?" No response, just the whisper of wind through the pines. I knelt beside the fire ring in front of the tent. The ashes were cold, old, but what caught my attention was the pot still sitting on the grate. I lifted it carefully. Inside was what looked like oatmeal, frozen solid, a spoon standing upright in the congealed mass. Someone had been cooking breakfast, and then, what, just left? Mid-meal? I checked inside the tent, sleeping bag still rolled out, a backpack sitting in the corner, undisturbed. I didn't touch anything, just backed away slowly and returned to our camp. "Find something interesting?" Tyler asked as I emerged from the trees. He was stringing a bear bag line between 2 pines, our food supplies already packed and ready to hoist. "Abandoned campsite," I said quietly, not wanting to alarm the clients. "Recent, maybe a week old, but weird, like someone just walked away from breakfast." Tyler paused, glancing toward the trees. "Saw any signs of trouble? Bear activity?" "Nothing. No tracks. No disturbance. No blood. Just an empty camp." He tied off the line and lowered his voice. "You want to report it?" I pulled out my satellite phone and checked the signal. 2 bars. "I'll call it in after dinner. Probably just some day hikers who got spooked and bailed, left their gear behind." But I didn't believe that, and from the look on Tyler's face, neither did he. Dinner was simple, freeze-dried camping meals rehydrated over the fire, hot coffee, trail mix. The group was in good spirits, swapping stories and jokes as the sun sank below the tree line. The temperature dropped fast once darkness fell, our breath forming thick clouds in the firelight. Around 8 p.m., Sarah Chen suddenly sat up straight, her head cocked to one side. "Did you hear that?" she asked. We all fell silent, listening. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, from somewhere across the lake, a voice. "Help." It was distant, thin, barely audible over the crackling fire, but unmistakable. "Someone's out there," Michael said, already reaching for his flashlight. Tyler and I exchanged a glance. "Everyone stay here," I said firmly. "Tyler and I will check it out." We grabbed our headlamps and started toward the shoreline, boots crunching over frozen ground. The lake stretched out before us, a black mirror reflecting the early stars. On the far shore, maybe half a mile away, the dark wall of forest rose like a solid mass. "Help, please." The voice came again, clearer now. A man's voice, strained and desperate. "Hello," Tyler shouted across the water. "Where are you?" Silence. Then, after a long moment, "Help. I'm lost. Please." Something about the voice made my skin prickle. The words were right. The tone was desperate, but there was something off about the cadence, like someone reading from a script they didn't quite understand. "We need to get coordinates and call it in," I said quietly to Tyler. "That doesn't sound right." "Agreed. Something's... Help, please. I'm cold." The voice was closer now. Much closer. Not across the lake anymore, but somewhere to our left, maybe 30 yards into the trees. Tyler swung his headlamp toward the sound. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but tree trunks and shadows. "Sir, can you see our light?" Tyler called. "Make noise so we can find you." No response, just the wind rattling through bare branches. We waited, scanning the forest with our lights, but nothing moved. After 5 minutes of silence, we headed back to camp. "Probably just sound carrying weird over the water," I told the group, though my voice lacked conviction. "We'll radio for a welfare check in the morning. For now, everyone stays close to camp. No wandering off alone, even to use the latrine." That night, I barely slept. I kept my knife within reach and listened to every sound outside the tent. Wind, the settling of trees, the distant crack of ice forming on the lake's edge, and once, around 3 a.m., footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the camp. I lay rigid in my sleeping bag, barely breathing, straining to hear. The steps were too measured to be an animal, too quiet to be a person in heavy boots. They moved around the perimeter of our sight, pausing occasionally, then continuing. After what felt like an hour, they stopped. I didn't leave the tent until dawn broke gray and cold over the lake. Everyone emerged tired and on edge. Even the Powell brothers, usually boisterous and energetic, were quiet as we made coffee and heated water for oatmeal. "I heard something last night," Sarah said softly, warming her hands around her mug. "Footsteps. Did anyone else?" "I heard them too," Michael confirmed. "Thought I was imagining it." Tyler caught my eye across the fire. He'd heard it as well. "All right," I said, making a decision. "We're breaking camp early. I don't like this. Something's not right here." No one argued. We packed quickly, breaking down tents and securing gear with an efficiency born of unease. I tried the satellite phone again to report both the abandoned camp and the strange voice, but the signal had disappeared completely. No bars, no connection. "We'll paddle back to Sawbill," I said. "Get to a ranger station and report everything. 3 hours of hard paddling and we're out." We loaded the canoes and pushed off from shore just after 9 a.m. The lake was glass smooth, our paddles cutting through the dark water with barely a sound. Tyler and I took the lead canoe, Sarah and Michael behind us, the Powell brothers bringing up the rear. We'd barely made it a quarter mile when Austin shouted, "Stop! Something's in the water." We all froze, paddles lifted. I turned to look back. Austin was pointing at something floating about 20 yards to the right of their canoe. At first, I thought it was a log. Then I saw the pale shape of a hand breaking the surface. "Stay in the boats," I ordered, my voice sharp. Tyler and I paddled over carefully, approaching the floating object from upstream. It was a body, face down, arms spread wide, wearing a heavy winter coat that had filled with water. The back of the head was matted with frozen hair. "Is he alive?" Sarah's voice was high and tight with panic. I already knew the answer, but Tyler and I maneuvered alongside anyway. Using my paddle, I carefully turned the body face up. The face was gray, lips blue, eyes half open and clouded. He'd been dead for days, the cold water preserving the body. But what made my stomach clench was the expression, mouth stretched wide in a frozen scream, teeth bared, eyes wide with absolute terror. "Everyone stay calm," I said, though my own heart was hammering. "We're going to... Jake." Tyler's voice was flat, strange. "Look at the shore." I turned. Standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 60 yards away, was a figure, tall, impossibly thin, wearing what looked like tattered clothes that hung loosely from an emaciated frame. Its head was crowned with something dark and jagged, antlers or branches, I couldn't tell. It stood perfectly still, watching us. "What is that?" Michael whispered. I didn't answer, couldn't answer, because as we stared, the figure raised one long arm and waved slowly, deliberately. Then it turned and walked back into the forest, movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet being pulled by strings. "Paddle," I said quietly. "Everyone paddle. Now." We moved fast, cutting through the water with desperate strokes. No one spoke. The only sound was the splash of paddles and our ragged breathing. Behind us, the body bobbed gently in our wake, face down once more. We reached the portage trail between Alton and Beth Lakes in record time. The narrow path cut through dense forest, forcing us to carry the canoes on our shoulders. Tyler and I took the lead, our canoe balanced between us, the others following in single file. Halfway across, Greg Powell stopped dead. "Guys," he said, voice shaking, "those are our footprints." We all looked down. The trail was covered in a thin layer of old snow, and pressed into it were boot prints, clear and recent. Our boot prints, from the way we'd come in 2 days ago, except we were heading the opposite direction now. These prints shouldn't be here, couldn't be here. "We must have taken a wrong turn," Michael said, but even he didn't sound convinced. "This is the only portage trail," Tyler said slowly. "There's no wrong turn. It's a straight shot." I knelt down, examining the prints more carefully. They were definitely ours. I recognized the tread pattern from my own boots, but as I followed them with my eyes, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The prints didn't just lead forward. They circled, looped back on themselves, spiraled in confused patterns before continuing down the trail, as if whoever made them had walked the same section over and over, trapped in an invisible maze. "Pick up the pace," I said. "We're not stopping until we're out of these woods." We moved faster, nearly jogging with the heavy canoes bouncing on our shoulders. The trail seemed to stretch endlessly, longer than I remembered. Trees pressed in from both sides, branches reaching overhead like grasping fingers. Then Sarah screamed. We spun around. She was pointing into the forest to our left, her face white with terror. Standing between the trees, maybe 20 feet away, was Tyler, not the real Tyler, who was right beside me, breathing hard and staring with wide eyes at his own impossible double. But another Tyler, standing perfectly still, wearing the exact same jacket, same hat, same boots. It smiled at us, mouth stretching too wide, revealing too many teeth. "Run," I said. We dropped the canoes and ran. The trail became a blur of brown and green, branches whipping at our faces, roots trying to trip us. Behind us, I could hear footsteps, impossibly fast, closing the distance. Not the heavy crunch of boots, but something lighter, quicker, the sound of something wrong chasing through the underbrush. Austin went down first. I heard him cry out, a sharp yelp of pain, then silence. Greg skidded to a stop, turning back. "Don't stop!" I shouted, but he was already running back toward his brother. We didn't see either of them again. The four of us, Tyler, Sarah, Michael, and I, burst out of the forest and onto the shore of Beth Lake. No canoes, no supplies, just the clothes on our backs and the desperate need to get away. "The ranger cabin," Tyler gasped. "North shore, maybe 2 miles. We can make it if we follow the shoreline." We started running again, boots pounding on frozen ground. The lake stretched to our right, dark and empty. The forest pressed close on our left, silent and watching. We'd covered maybe half a mile when I heard Sarah's voice behind me. "Jake, help me." I turned. Sarah was still running beside Michael, her face twisted with confusion and fear, but I just heard her voice calling from the forest, from behind us. "Jake, I'm hurt. Please." It was her voice, perfect in every way, except Sarah's mouth wasn't moving. "Don't listen," I said. "Keep running. It's not real. Help me. Jake, it hurts." Michael stumbled, turning toward the trees. "Sarah, where?" "I'm right here," the real Sarah screamed, grabbing his arm. "Michael, I'm right here. Don't look at it." But Michael was already staring into the forest, his eyes glassy and distant. He took one step toward the tree line. Tyler tackled him, dragging him back. "Snap out of it!" Michael blinked, awareness returning to his eyes. I heard. I know. We all did. We made it another 1/4 mile before Tyler stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with him. He was staring ahead, down the shoreline, his face slack with horror. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not possible." I followed his gaze and felt reality tilt sideways. Sitting on the shore ahead of us, maybe 300 yards away, was our campsite, the same campsite we'd left hours ago on Alton Lake. Same stone fire ring, same cleared area, same configuration of trees. "We've been going in circles," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "How is that possible? We followed the shoreline. We couldn't have." "It's hurting us," I said quietly. "Whatever it is, it's been hurting us. The abandoned camp, the body in the water, the sounds, it's all been pushing us exactly where it wants us to go." "Where's that?" Michael asked. Before I could answer, Tyler screamed. I spun around just in time to see something massive and pale explode from the tree line. It moved on all fours, impossibly fast, limbs bent at wrong angles. It hit Tyler like a freight train, driving him to the ground. I caught one clear glimpse of its face, elongated and skeletal, skin stretched too tight over prominent bones, eyes sunken and burning with a terrible hunger, mouth opened wide enough to swallow a man's head whole, filled with jagged teeth. Antlers, massive and twisted, jutted from its skull like a crown of bone. Tyler's screams cut off abruptly. "Run!" I grabbed Sarah and Michael, dragging them away from the horror behind us. We crashed through the underbrush, abandoning the shoreline, plunging into the forest. Branches tore at our skin, roots caught at our feet. Behind us, the sound of feeding, wet and terrible. I don't know how long we ran. Minutes, hours. Time had lost all meaning. The forest seemed to shift around us, paths appearing and disappearing, the same landmarks repeating like a glitch in reality. Then, suddenly, impossibly, a light appeared through the trees ahead. The ranger cabin. Small, weathered, windows glowing with warm light. We burst from the forest and up onto the porch. I grabbed the door handle and pulled. Locked. "Break it down," Michael shouted. I threw my shoulder against it once, twice. On the third impact, the door splintered and gave way. We tumbled inside, Michael immediately dragging a heavy wooden table against the door. The cabin was small, just one room with a wood stove, a cot, and shelves lined with emergency supplies. But it was warm, blessedly warm, and the walls felt solid. "There's a radio," Sarah said, rushing to a desk in the corner. She grabbed the handset and pressed the transmit button. "Hello? Anyone? We need help. We're at Beth Lake Ranger Cabin. We need immediate extraction." Static answered her. She tried again, adjusting frequencies, but every channel returned the same empty hiss. "The windows," I said. "Cover the windows. Don't let it see inside." We worked frantically, pulling down whatever we could find. Old maps, emergency blankets, even our own jackets, anything to block the view from outside. As I secured the last window, I heard it. Footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. Then a voice. Tyler's voice. "Jake, let me in. It's cold out here." I pressed my back against the wall, knife gripped in my shaking hand. "Tyler's dead," I said. "That's not him. Please, I'm hurt. Help me." The doorknob rattled. Once, twice, then stopped. Silence fell, deep and absolute. We waited, merely breathing, listening for any sound. Minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Then, from directly above us, from the roof, came the sound of scraping. Something heavy was dragging itself across the wooden shingles, moving toward the chimney. I looked up at the old stone fireplace. The flue was open. I could see stars through the gap. "The flue," I whispered urgently. "Close the flue." Michael lunged for the fireplace, reaching up to grab the handle. But before he could pull it shut, something pale and impossibly long thrust down through the opening. An arm, far too long to be human, ending in fingers tipped with black, curved claws. It swept through the cabin blindly, searching. The hand brushed against Michael's face. He fell back, screaming, as the claws left 4 deep gashes across his cheek. I grabbed a metal fire poker from beside the stove and swung hard at the searching arm. The poker connected with a sickening crack. The thing shrieked, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard, equal parts rage and hunger and something older, deeper. The arm withdrew rapidly up through the chimney. Sarah rushed forward and yanked the flue shut, the metal door slamming into place with a decisive clang. "Wedge something against it," I shouted. We grabbed whatever we could find, stacking firewood, books, even the small table, jamming it all into place to keep the flue closed. Above us, the scraping resumed, circling the roof again and again, looking for another way in. Michael slumped against the wall, blood streaming between his fingers as he pressed his hand to his torn face. Sarah grabbed a first aid kit and began cleaning the wounds, her hands shaking. "What is that thing?" she whispered. I'd spent enough time in these woods, heard enough stories from old rangers and indigenous guides, to know the answer, but saying it out loud felt like inviting something worse. "Wendigo," I said finally. "It's a Wendigo. Those are just stories," Michael said weakly. "Native legends. We need to survive until dawn," I said, ignoring him. "Sunlight. If the old stories are true, it won't come near the cabin in daylight. That's hours away," Sarah said. "Then we hold. We don't open that door. We don't look outside. And we don't listen to anything we hear, no matter how real it sounds." We spent the next hours in tense silence. The thing on the roof never stopped moving, sometimes scraping, sometimes just walking in slow circles. And the voices were the worst. Tyler begging to be let in, Austin and Greg crying for help, Sarah's own voice calling to her from outside, perfect in every inflection, even my own voice, telling Sarah and Michael to open the door, that I'd found help, that it was safe now. Each time, we huddled closer together and ignored it. Around 4 a.m., Michael started to scream. His face had turned gray, the scratches from the Wendigo's claws festering impossibly fast. Black veins spread from the wounds, creeping across his cheek and down his neck. His eyes became distant, unfocused. "I'm so hungry," he whispered. "Sarah, I'm so hungry." He looked at his wife with an expression that made my blood freeze. Not love, not fear, hunger. I raised my knife. "Michael, look at me. Focus on my voice. You're still you. Fight it." But his eyes had gone yellow, glowing faintly in the dim cabin. His jaw began to stretch, tendons popping as his mouth opened wider than any human mouth should. Sarah backed away, sobbing. "Michael, please." I made a decision then that I'll carry for the rest of my life. I lunged forward and drove my knife between Michael's ribs, angled up toward his heart. He looked at me with something like gratitude in those terrible yellow eyes, then collapsed. Sarah's scream was lost in the sound of the thing on the roof shrieking in triumph. It had gotten one of us, after all, even if not in the way it had wanted. The hours until dawn were the longest of my life. Sarah sat in the corner, catatonic with grief and shock. I stood by the door, knife in hand, watching Michael's body and praying it wouldn't get back up. Finally, impossibly, the sky outside began to lighten. The scraping on the roof stopped. A terrible silence fell over the cabin. I waited another full hour until sunlight was streaming through gaps in our makeshift window coverings before I dared to open the door. The porch was empty. The forest around the cabin stood silent and still in the cold morning light. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering everything in pristine white, except for the tracks. Deep, clawed prints circled the cabin dozens of times, pressed deep into the snow, and leading away into the forest, growing fainter and more distant. A single set of enormous footprints that didn't belong to anything that should exist. "We need to move," I said quietly. "Now, while there's daylight." Sarah didn't respond, didn't even look at me. I gently took her arm and guided her out of the cabin, leaving Michael's body where it lay. We followed the shoreline south in silence, moving as fast as Sarah's shock-numbed legs could manage. No voices called to us, no footsteps followed, but I felt watch the entire way, eyes tracking us from deep in the shadows between trees. It took us 6 hours to reach the Sawbill Lake access point. A Forest Service truck was parked in the lot. A young ranger leaning against it did a double take when he saw us emerge from the trail. "Jesus, are you two okay? We've had reports of missing campers." "Radio for emergency services," I interrupted, my voice hoarse from dehydration and screaming. "Multiple casualties, and tell them not to go looking for the bodies. Not until they bring enough men and enough daylight." The ranger stared at my blood-stained clothes, at Sarah's 1,000-yard stare, and wisely chose not to ask questions. He made the call. Search and rescue teams found Tyler's body 2 days later, or what was left of it. The Powell brothers were never found. The investigation concluded that we'd been attacked by a bear, despite the complete lack of bear tracks or bear behavior. Michael's death was ruled self-defense, a mercy killing during a hypothermic psychotic break. The ranger cabin was boarded up a week after the incident. Officially, it needed structural repairs. Unofficially, a crew sent to clean it found things inside they refused to discuss. Markings on the walls, impossible claw marks scored deep into solid timber, and bloodstains that wouldn't wash away no matter how hard they scrubbed. I never went back to the Boundary Waters, never worked as a wilderness guide again. Some people say I'm a coward, that I let fear win. Maybe they're right. But sometimes, on cold October nights, I wake up hearing Tyler's voice outside my window, calling my name. I know better than to look. I know better than to answer, because whatever wore his face in those woods, it never stopped being hungry, and I think a part of it followed me home. If this story kept you up at night, if you felt that chill crawl down your spine right alongside me, do me a favor, hit that like button and drop a comment below telling me about your own strange encounters in the wilderness. And if you want to hear more stories from people who've seen things they can't explain, stories that'll make you think twice about that camping trip you've been planning, go ahead and subscribe. Because out there in the deep woods, in those places where cell signals die and trails disappear, something is still waiting, still watching, still hungry. Stay safe out there, and remember, if someone calls your name from the darkness, make sure you can see them before you answer. I was 70 feet above the frozen forest floor when I heard something start climbing the metal stairs below me, and I'd locked that access door 3 hours ago. My name is Sean Brennan, and for 8 months I worked as a fire lookout in Superior National Forest. Most people don't realize that fire towers stay operational year-round, even in the dead of winter. We're not just watching for fires during off-season. We're watching for poachers, illegal loggers, lost hikers, and anything else that doesn't belong in 100,000 acres of frozen wilderness. The job appealed to me after I left the Minneapolis Fire Department. 5 years of running into burning buildings had left me with some things I needed to work through, and my therapist suggested isolation might help. Funny how that turned out. The Caribou Peak Lookout Tower sits on the highest point in the northern section of Superior National Forest, accessible only by a 4-mile snowmobile trail from the nearest service road. The tower itself is a classic 70-foot steel structure, 4 legs meeting at a small enclosed observation room at the top. From up there, you can see for miles in every direction, endless forest broken only by frozen lakes and the occasional logging road. I've been stationed there since November 1st. It was now February 9th. 3 months of solitude, cold, and routine. Every morning at 0600, I'd radio into the ranger station. Every evening at 1800, another check-in. In between, I'd scan the horizon with binoculars, maintain the equipment, read books, and try not to go stir-crazy. The observation room was small but functional, 12 feet by 12 feet with windows on all sides, a wood stove that barely kept the cold at bay, a cot, a desk with the radio equipment, and shelves packed with supplies, everything I needed to survive alone through a Minnesota winter. The isolation didn't bother me at first, actually felt peaceful after years of sirens and chaos, but around the start of February, things began to feel different. The forest grew quieter, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. February 6th was when I found the first deer. I'd gone down to check my supply cache at the base of the tower, a routine task I did every few days. The morning was brutally cold, -15 degrees, the kind of cold that makes your lungs ache with each breath. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering everything in pristine white. The deer was lying about 20 yards from the tower base, positioned in a cleared circle of snow. At first, I thought it had just died there naturally, maybe from the cold or disease. But as I approached, I saw the wrongness of it. The animal was positioned on its side, legs extended straight out, neck bent at an unnatural angle with its head pointing directly at the tower. Its eyes were missing, just dark, empty sockets staring up at nothing, and it was completely drained. No blood in the snow around it, no wounds I could see, just a desiccated husk that looked like it had been dead for months despite the lack of decomposition. I circled it slowly, my breath fogging in the frigid air. No tracks led to or from the carcass. Not deer tracks, not wolf tracks, nothing. Just this dead animal sitting in a perfect circle of disturbed snow, as if it had been placed there deliberately. Ranger station, this is Caribou Peak, I said into my handheld radio. Got something weird here. Found a dead deer, no visible cause of death, positioned in a strange way. Might be poachers? Static hissed back at me for a long moment before the dispatcher's voice crackled through. Copy that, Caribou Peak. Can you document and continue monitoring? We'll send someone when the trails are passable. Copy. Will document. I took photos with my camera, measurements, notes. Then I climbed back up the 70 feet of metal stairs to the observation room, my boots ringing against the frozen steel. The access door at the base was equipped with a heavy padlock. I made sure it was secured before ascending, something I always did. The stairs were the only way up or down, and I wasn't about to leave them unsecured. That night, I couldn't shake the image of that deer, the empty eye sockets, the unnatural positioning, the complete absence of blood. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on a book, but my eyes kept drifting to the windows, scanning the dark forest below. Around 11 p.m., I heard it for the first time, a long, low howl that echoed across the frozen landscape. It wasn't a wolf. I'd heard plenty of wolf howls, and this was different. Deeper, more resonant, with an almost human quality to the sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the tree line, but the darkness was absolute beyond the small circle of light from my observation room. Whatever had made that sound was out there in the black, watching. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, February 7th, I found 2 more deer. They were positioned at equal distances around the tower base, forming points of a triangle with the first deer I'd found. Same condition, drained, empty-eyed, placed deliberately in cleared circles of snow, no tracks anywhere. Ranger station, Caribou Peak. I've got 3 dead deer now, arranged in a pattern around the tower. This isn't natural. Something's going on here. The response took longer this time. When it came, the dispatcher sounded uncertain. Copy, Caribou Peak. Can you describe the pattern? I did, in detail. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Caribou Peak, maintain your position. We're going to consult with wildlife management and get back to you. Copy. But they never called back. That day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I found myself pacing the observation room, checking and rechecking the windows, scanning the forest with increasing paranoia. The silence outside was oppressive, absolute. No birds, no wind, nothing but endless frozen stillness. Around 4 p.m., I decided to do another supply check, partly out of routine, partly because I needed to move, to do something other than sit and wait. I pulled on my heavy coat, grabbed my radio and flashlight, and started down the metal stairs. The temperature had dropped even further, my breath forming thick clouds that froze almost instantly. Each step on the metal stairs rang out sharp and clear in the silence, announcing my presence to the entire forest. At the bottom, I checked the padlock. Still secure. I made my way to the supply cache, a heavy steel box buried in the snow about 30 feet from the tower base. That's when I saw the 4th deer. It was positioned directly between the tower and the cache, completing a square pattern. But this one was different. It wasn't lying down. It was propped upright, 4 legs extended, head raised, positioned as if it was standing, except its legs didn't reach the ground. Something had suspended it there, frozen in an impossible posture, and its missing eyes were pointed directly at me. I backed away slowly, my hand moving to the bear spray on my belt. The forest around me suddenly felt alive, with presence, with watching, with something vast and patient observing my every move. I turned and ran back to the tower, my boots slipping on ice, hands shaking as I fumbled with the padlock. Got it open, slammed the access door shut behind me, locked it from the inside, climbed the 70 feet faster than I'd ever climbed them before. Back in the observation room, I grabbed the radio with trembling hands. Ranger station, Caribou Peak, emergency. I need immediate extraction. Something's out here. Something's arranging dead animals around my tower. I need to get out. Now. Static answered me. I tried again, adjusting frequencies, checking connections. Nothing but empty hiss. The radio was dead. No, wait, not dead. As I stared at it in disbelief, the receive light flickered. Then I heard my own voice coming through the speaker. Ranger station, this is Caribou Peak. Morning check-in. All quiet here. Weather holding steady. No issues to report. It was my voice, my exact cadence and tone, but I hadn't said those words. That was yesterday's morning check-in, being played back to me. The recording continued. Copy that, Caribou Peak. Weather system moving in tonight. Be prepared for heavy snow. Check in at 1800. Roger. Caribou Peak out. Then silence. I stared at the radio, my mind struggling to process what I'd just heard. Someone or something had been recording my transmissions and was now playing them back, which meant the ranger station thought I was fine, thought I was still making regular check-ins. No one was coming to help. I was alone. The sun set around 5:30 p.m., plunging the forest into darkness. I lit the wood stove and kept it burning hot, more for the comfort of light and sound than warmth. Sat at my desk with my hunting knife within easy reach, watching the windows. The howling started again around 8 p.m., closer this time, much closer. That same inhuman sound, echoing from multiple directions at once, surrounding the tower. I pressed my face against the cold glass, trying to see anything in the darkness below. Movement caught my eye. Something pale was moving between the trees at the edge of the clearing, too tall to be a deer, too thin to be a bear. It moved with a strange, loping gait, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes dropping to 4. Then it stepped into the small circle of light from my observation room. My breath caught in my throat. It looked almost human at first glance, but the proportions were all wrong. Too tall, at least 8 feet, with limbs that were too long and too thin, joints bending at angles that shouldn't be possible. Its skin was pale, almost luminescent, stretched tightly over prominent bones, and the head was wrong in every way. An elongated skull, almost cervine in shape, with massive antlers spreading from the crown, but the face had elements of human features twisted into something nightmarish, sunken eyes that glowed with a faint yellow light, a mouth that stretched too wide, filled with teeth that caught the light like broken glass. It stood there, staring up at the observation room, staring directly at me. Then it smiled. I stumbled backward, my hand knocking over a mug on the desk. The crash seemed impossibly loud in the small room. When I looked back out the window, the thing was gone. But I could hear it, footsteps in the snow, circling the tower, slow, deliberate, methodical, testing, learning. The footsteps stopped. Silence fell again, deeper than before. I waited, barely breathing, straining to hear. Then came the sound that turned my blood to ice. Metal creaking, the sound of weight on the tower stairs. Something was climbing. I rushed to the trapdoor in the observation room floor, the only entrance to the platform. It had a heavy bolt lock, and I slammed it home with shaking hands. The metal stairs spiraled up around the outside of the tower structure, leading to this trapdoor. It was the only way in. The climbing continued, slow, steady, rhythmic. Whatever was coming up those stairs wasn't hurrying. It knew I had nowhere to go. I grabbed my knife and backed against the far wall, eyes fixed on the trapdoor. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right below me. Then they stopped. Silence. Long, terrible silence. Then a voice drifted up from below, muffled by the trapdoor but unmistakably mine. "Ranger Station, this is Caribou Peak. Everything's fine up here. Nice quiet night. No problems at all." It was using my voice, my exact voice, but the words were wrong, the phrasing off, like someone who'd learned to speak by listening to recordings but didn't understand the meaning. "Sean?" the voice called, still using my own tone. "Sean, it's cold out here. Let me in." I didn't respond, couldn't respond. My throat had closed up with fear. "Sean, I'm you. You have to let me in. I'm so cold." The trapdoor shuddered as something pressed against it from below. Once, twice, testing the bolt. "Let me in, Sean. Let me in. Let me in." The voice began to change, shifting from my tone to something else, something deeper and more ancient. "Let me in, let me in, let me in." The words blurred together into a rhythmic chant that seemed to vibrate through the metal structure of the tower. The whole observation room began to shake. I fell to my knees, hands pressed over my ears, but I could still hear it. The chanting, the scratching at the trapdoor, the metal groaning under impossible pressure. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I lowered my hand slowly, listening. Nothing, no sound at all. I stayed crouched on the floor, knife gripped in white-knuckled hands, waiting for whatever came next. Minutes passed, an hour. The wood stove burned low, and I was afraid to move to add more fuel. Around midnight, I heard a new sound. Scratching, not at the trapdoor, but on the windows. All around me, on every side of the observation room, something was scratching at the glass. I turned slowly, illuminating each window in turn with my flashlight. Pressed against the glass on all sides were pale hands, dozens of them, fingers splayed wide, claws scraping slowly down the surface. And between the hands, faces, twisted, skeletal faces with glowing eyes, all wearing expressions that might have been hunger or rage or something else entirely. They weren't trying to break in. They were just watching, waiting, letting me know there was no escape. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the center of the room, surrounded by those pressing faces. Time lost all meaning. My mind kept trying to rationalize, to explain, but there was no explanation for this. No bear, no wolf, no human could do this. This was something else, something that shouldn't exist. Eventually, exhaustion overwhelmed terror. I collapsed onto the cot, knife still gripped in my hand, and fell into a fitful sleep filled with nightmares of empty eye sockets and reaching hands. I woke to pale dawn light filtering through the windows. The scratching had stopped. The faces were gone. For a moment, I thought I dreamed the whole thing. Then I saw the windows. Every single pane of glass was covered in scratch marks, deep gouges that had nearly penetrated through, and in the frost that covered the exterior, something had drawn symbols. Crude stick figures arranged in patterns I didn't recognize, primitive pictographs that hurt to look at too long. I stumbled to my feet, every muscle aching. The wood stove had gone cold. The room was freezing. I checked the trapdoor, still bolted, still secure. I had to get out, had to get down from this tower and make a run for it. 4 miles to the service road. Maybe I could make it before dark. But as I looked out the windows, scanning the forest below, I saw them. More deer. Dozens of them now, arranged in concentric circles around the tower base, all positioned upright like the fourth one had been, all facing inward, all with empty eye sockets turned toward me, and standing among them, perfectly still in the pale morning light, was the thing, the creature, the Wendigo, though I hadn't let myself name it until that moment. It stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the tower with those terrible yellow eyes. I grabbed the radio, knowing it was useless but desperate anyway, clicked through every frequency, calling for help, begging for someone to answer, and then, impossibly, I heard a response. Caribou Peak. This is Ranger Station. We read you. What's your status? Relief flooded through me. Ranger Station. I need immediate extraction. There's something here. I'm trapped in the tower. I need help now. Copy that. Caribou Peak. Can you describe the situation? I tried. I stumbled over the words, knowing how crazy I sounded. Dead deer, scratching at the windows, something climbing the tower stairs. The dispatcher listened patiently. Caribou Peak. We're showing you've made all your scheduled check-ins. Your last transmission was 10 minutes ago. You reported all clear. My blood ran cold. No. I didn't transmit 10 minutes ago. I haven't been able to reach you since yesterday. Caribou Peak. We have recordings of all your check-ins. Would you like us to play them back? Yes, play them back. What came through the radio next made me want to vomit. My voice, calm and professional, making routine check-ins. Morning, evening, morning again, all timestamps correct. But I hadn't made any of those calls. Ranger Station, I said slowly. Those aren't me. Something's been impersonating me. You need to send someone now. Silence on the other end. Then, Caribou Peak. Are you experiencing any symptoms of cabin fever, hallucinations, paranoia? It's not uncommon for isolated personnel to... I'm not hallucinating. Send someone. Caribou Peak. We'll schedule a wellness check when weather permits. In the meantime, try to get some rest. Ranger Station out. Wait, don't. But they were gone. I stared at the radio in disbelief. They thought I was losing my mind, and maybe I was. But the scratches on the windows were real. The deer outside were real. And the thing watching me from the tree line, that was real too. I spent that day, February 8th, preparing, If no one was coming to help, I'd have to save myself. I gathered supplies, filled a pack with food, water, first aid kit, flares, checked my knife, my flashlight, my compass. 4 miles to the service road. I could make it if I moved fast and didn't stop. I waited until mid-afternoon, wanting as much daylight as possible. Then I unbolted the trapdoor and listened. No sounds from below. Slowly, carefully, I opened it and peered down. The stairs were empty. I could see all the way to the bottom, to the access door that led to the ground. It was standing open. I definitely remembered locking it. Definitely. But it was open now, swinging slightly in the wind. An invitation, or a trap. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't stay up here another night. I descended the stairs slowly, every step echoing in the silence. Kept my knife in one hand, my other hand on the cold metal railing. Down, 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 70 feet, feeling like 70 miles. Reached the bottom, stepped through the access door. The forest spread out before me, silent and waiting. The deer carcasses were still there, dozens of them now, forming elaborate patterns in the snow. I tried not to look at them as I started walking. Made it maybe 100 yards before I heard the footsteps behind me. I turned, nothing there, just trees and snow and silence. Started walking again, faster now. The footsteps resumed, matching my pace exactly. Stop, and they stopped. Run, and they ran. I broke into a sprint, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face. The forest seemed to close in around me, trees pressing closer, paths disappearing. I could hear it behind me, gaining, that distinctive loping gait, sometimes 2 legs, sometimes 4. A fallen log appeared in front of me and I leaped over it, lost my footing on the other side, and went down hard. Pain shot through my ankle. I tried to stand and my leg buckled. The footsteps stopped. I looked up. It was standing 10 feet away, perfectly still, head tilted to one side, watching me with those yellow eyes that burned with ancient hunger. This close, I could see every detail. The way its ribs pressed against translucent skin, the black talons at the ends of impossibly long fingers, the antlers that seemed to grow even as I watched, spreading wider and wider like a crown of bone. It took one step toward me, then another, each movement precise, deliberate, savoring the moment. I gripped my knife and waited. If this was how it ended, I'd at least face it head on. But then, from somewhere to my left, came a sound that shattered the terrible silence, the whine of a snowmobile engine. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. For just a moment, something like fear or anger flickered across its nightmare face. Then it turned and fled, moving impossibly fast, disappearing into the trees in seconds. The snowmobile burst into view, and I've never been so happy to see another human being in my life. A ranger named Walsh, doing a routine trail check, found me there in the snow. Got me loaded onto the snowmobile and back to the ranger station. They sent a team out to Caribou Peak the next day. Found the observation room just as I described it. Windows scratched to hell. Strange symbols in the frost. Found the deer carcasses too, all of them, arranged in their elaborate patterns, but no sign of what had made them. The recordings of my check-ins were analyzed. Voice pattern analysis confirmed they were me, my exact vocal signature. But the timestamps showed transmissions being made while I was documented as being offline, radio destroyed. The tower was decommissioned the following week, officially due to structural concerns and equipment malfunctions. Unofficially, Walsh told me they'd had similar reports from lookouts in that area going back decades, people seeing things, hearing things. Most never stayed long enough to file detailed reports. The ones who stayed too long were never quite the same afterward. My ankle healed, the physical scratches and bruises faded, but some nights, when it's quiet, I still hear it. That voice that sounds exactly like mine, calling from somewhere outside, asking to be let in. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch myself walking to the door before I remember. before I remember that whatever's out there wearing my voice isn't me, isn't human, and has been very, very patient. If you're still reading this, if you made it through my story and felt that knot of dread tightening in your chest, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button, leave a comment, tell me I'm not crazy, tell me someone else out there has seen what I've seen. And if you want to hear more stories from people who've stared into the darkness and lived to tell about it, subscribe to this channel, because these stories, they're not entertainment, they're warnings. They're survival guides for a world where things still lurk in the deep places, wearing faces they've stolen, speaking with voices they've learned, waiting for us to open the door. Stay safe out there, and if you ever work a night shift alone in the wilderness, make absolutely sure you know who's really on the other end of that radio, because it might be you, or it might be something that learned how to sound like you, and by the time you figure out which, it's already too late. My dead wife was standing at the edge of the frozen lake calling my name, but her feet weren't touching the ground and her voice was coming from behind me. I'm a wildlife biologist. For the past 17 years, I've studied wolf populations across North America, tracking pack movements, monitoring breeding patterns, documenting territory disputes. It's solitary work, often dangerous, always isolated. But after Sarah died 2 years ago, the isolation became less of a job requirement and more of a necessity. Grief has a way of making you seek out empty places. The northern Quebec assignment came through in late February. A Cree conservation officer named Joseph Blackbird had reported unusual wolf behavior near Lac Mistassini, massive territorial disruptions, entire packs abandoning established ranges, scattered kills with strange feeding patterns. The Canadian Wildlife Service wanted documentation before the spring thaw made the backcountry inaccessible. I flew into Chibougamau on March 2nd, met Joseph at the small regional airport. He was in his 50s, weathered face marked by decades of northern winters, eyes that had seen things he didn't talk about with outsiders. "You picked a bad time to come north," he said as we loaded my gear into his truck. "The thaw is starting early this year. Warmest March anyone remembers." "That a problem?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands tight on the steering wheel. "The elders say the cold keeps some things sleeping. When it warms up too fast, things wake up hungry." I'd heard similar folklore before. Every northern community had stories about winter spirits and hungry ghosts. I nodded politely and changed the subject to wolf migration patterns. The research cabin sat on the northern shore of a small, unnamed lake about 40 miles from the nearest settlement. Joseph's truck could only get us within 3 miles. The rest we covered by snowmobile, towing a sled loaded with my equipment and 3 weeks' worth of supplies. The cabin was small but solid, built decades ago by trappers and maintained by the Conservation Service. Single room with a wood stove, a cot, a table, and shelves stocked with emergency provisions. Windows on 3 sides gave clear views of the frozen lake and the dense spruce forest surrounding it. "Radio works most of the time," Joseph said, pointing to the equipment on the table. "Call in every 3 days. If you miss a check-in, I come looking. Cell phones don't work out here. No towers within 60 miles. He helped me unload supplies, showing me where everything was stored, how to prime the temperamental water pump, the quirks of the wood stove. Then he paused at the door, his expression troubled. "The wolf pack you're tracking, they denned about 5 miles northeast of here. But 3 days ago, they moved, headed south, all of them, fast, like something scared them off." "What would scare off an entire pack?" I asked. Joseph met my eyes, his expression grave. "That's what worries me. Wolves don't run from much, and they especially don't run during denning season. Not with pups. Maybe another pack challenged them. Maybe." But his tone suggested he didn't believe that. "Just be careful, and if you hear things at night, things that sound like people you know, don't answer. Don't go looking." "What kind of things?" He shook his head. "Just don't answer." Then he climbed onto his snowmobile and disappeared into the trees. the engine's whine fading into silence. I spent the rest of that day settling in, organizing equipment, setting up my monitoring station. The lake stretched out before the cabin, a vast expanse of white broken only by the occasional pressure ridge where the ice had buckled and refrozen. The forest beyond was silent. No birds, no wind, just that peculiar stillness that comes with deep cold. Except, it wasn't that cold. The thermometer outside read 32 degrees Fahrenheit, right at freezing, unseasonably warm for early March in northern Quebec. I could hear water dripping from the cabin's eaves, the slow, steady sound of melting snow. That first night passed without incident. I reviewed topographical maps, programmed GPS coordinates for the wolf pack's last known location, and fell asleep around midnight to the crackling of the wood stove. I woke at dawn to the sound of howling. Wolves. Definitely wolves. But something was off about the sound. It was too discordant, too frantic, lacking the organized chorus of a normal pack. I grabbed my binoculars and stepped outside into the gray morning light. The howling was coming from the northeast, the direction Joseph had indicated. I could see nothing but trees from the cabin, but the desperation in those howls made my stomach tighten. These were fear sounds, not territorial calls. Then, abruptly, the howling stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. I spent that morning hiking northeast, following GPS coordinates and wolf tracks in the snow. The tracks were easy to follow, deep prints in the wet snow showing a pack moving fast. But intermingled with the wolf tracks were others, human footprints, bare feet despite the freezing temperatures. The footprints appeared and disappeared randomly, sometimes running parallel to the wolf tracks, sometimes crossing them, sometimes just appearing in the middle of untouched snow with no indication of where they'd come from. I found the wolves around noon. They were in a small clearing about 4 miles from the cabin, arranged in a perfect circle, all facing outward. 7 adult wolves, all dead, all frozen in identical poses with their teeth bared and their hackles raised. In the center of the circle, untouched by the wolves, was a crude structure made from branches and bones, stacked into a conical shape about 4 feet tall. I approached slowly, my camera out, documenting everything. No visible wounds on the wolves, no blood in the snow. They looked like they'd simply frozen to death while standing guard around this totem. As I circled the clearing, taking photos from every angle, I noticed something that made my breath catch. Carved into the bark of the surrounding trees were symbols, crude pictographs that looked ancient. Stick figures with antlers, figures with their mouths opened impossibly wide, figures that seemed to be falling or flying or dancing, and at the base of each carved tree, small offerings, bones arranged in patterns, tufts of fur tied with what looked like sinew, stones stacked in careful cairns. This wasn't just wolf behavior. Someone or something had been here, arranging these animals, marking this place. I was so focused on the carvings that I almost missed the sound behind me. A soft footstep in the snow. I turned quickly. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a woman. She wore a summer dress, completely inappropriate for the weather, and her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders. She was staring at me with an expression of profound sadness. "Derek?" she said, and my heart stopped. That was Sarah's voice, my wife's voice. The woman even looked like Sarah, the same build, the same way of standing with her weight on one leg, the same tilt to her head. "You're not real," I whispered, my hand shaking. "Sarah died 2 years ago." "I know," the woman said, her voice soft and familiar. "I've been waiting for you. It's so cold here, Derek. Won't you help me?" I took a step backward, my boot catching on a fallen branch. "Stay away from me. Don't you miss me?" The woman's expression twisted into something pleading. "Don't you want to see me again? Touch me again? I've missed you so much." My vision blurred with tears, grief, and terror warring in my chest. Part of me, the wounded part that had never stopped mourning, wanted desperately to believe. Wanted to run to her, to hold her, to pretend for just a moment that she hadn't died in that car accident. But I'd seen the funeral. I'd scattered her ashes, and this thing wearing her face. When it moved closer, I saw that its feet didn't quite touch the ground, hovering an inch above the snow without leaving prints. "You're not Sarah," I said, my voice stronger now. "Whatever you are, stay away from me." The thing's face shifted, the sadness melting into something else, something hungry. Its mouth stretched wider than any human mouth should, revealing teeth that were too long, too sharp. The eyes remained Sarah's eyes, which somehow made it worse. Then it laughed, a sound like breaking ice, and vanished. Not running into the trees, not hiding, just gone, like it had never been there at all. I ran back to the cabin, crashing through underbrush, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Didn't stop until I was inside with the door barred and my back pressed against the rough wood. My hands shook as I grabbed the radio. "Conservation base, this is Research Cabin 7. Joseph, are you there? I need to talk to someone, now." Static hissed back at me. I tried again, adjusting frequencies, checking connections. Nothing but empty noise. I spent the rest of that day checking and rechecking the cabin, securing windows, reinforcing the door, preparing defenses against something I didn't understand. As darkness fell, I built up the fire in the wood stove and sat at the table with my hunting knife, watching the windows. Around 10 p.m., I heard Sarah's voice again, this time from right outside the cabin. "Derek, please. I'm so cold. Let me in. Just for a little while. I promise I won't stay long." I closed my eyes, forcing myself not to look toward the door. "You're not real. You're not her." "But I know things only she would know," the voice continued, and now it was coming from the window to my left. "I know about the morning she told you she was pregnant. Remember? You cried. You were so scared you'd be a bad father. I held you and told you it was going to be okay." My chest constricted painfully. That had happened. That exact conversation, in our apartment. Early morning light streaming through the windows. A memory I'd shared with no one. "I know about the baby we lost," the voice whispered, softer now, filled with genuine pain. "The miscarriage. How we held each other in the hospital and promised we'd try again. How you blamed yourself even though I told you it wasn't your fault." "Stop," I said, my voice breaking. "Stop it. I forgive you, Derek, for not being there when I died. For being on assignment in Alaska while I was driving home alone. For not answering your phone when I called. I forgive you." The guilt that I'd carried for 2 years surged up, overwhelming. Sarah had called me that night, 3 times, while I was tracking a wolf pack in the Denali wilderness. I hadn't heard the phone. By the time I checked messages, she was already gone, killed instantly when her car hit black ice and went off the road. "Let me in," the voice begged. "Let me hold you. Let me tell you it's okay. Let me make the pain stop." My hand moved toward the door without conscious thought. The bar was heavy, but I could lift it, could open the door, could see her again, even if just for a moment. Then I heard a different voice, Joseph's voice, rough and urgent, coming from my memory of our conversation. "If you hear things that sound like people you know, don't answer, don't go looking." I jerked my hand back from the door, stumbling backward. "You're not Sarah. She's dead. She's gone. And whatever you are, you can't have me." The temperature in the cabin dropped suddenly, dramatically. My breath formed thick clouds. Frost began spreading across the inside of the windows, intricate patterns that looked almost like reaching hands. The voice outside changed, deepening, losing its human quality. Then, oh wait, I'm very good at waiting. And eventually, Derek, you'll open the door. They always do. Footsteps circled the cabin, slow and methodical, but these weren't Sarah's footsteps. These were heavy, deliberate, the sound of something large moving on 2 legs. And occasionally, the rhythm would change, dropping to all 4s, scraping and scratching at the frozen ground. I didn't sleep that night. Sat with my back against the wall, knife in hand, listening to those footsteps circle endlessly until dawn broke gray and reluctant over the lake. When light finally came, the footsteps stopped. I waited another hour before daring to look outside. The snow around the cabin was churned up, covered in tracks. Most were the same bare footprints I'd seen earlier, but now they were larger, more elongated, the toes spreading wider apart. And in several places, the footprints changed mid-stride, going from almost human to something else entirely, something with claws and a stride length that was impossible. But what made my blood run cold was what I found on the porch. Sitting on the wooden planks, arranged carefully, were my boots. The same boots I'd been wearing yesterday when I found the wolves. The same boots I was wearing right now. I looked down at my feet, confused. I was definitely wearing my boots. I could feel them, see them on my feet. But there they were on the porch too, placed side by side, still damp with melted snow. I kicked the porch boots. They were solid, real, not a hallucination, which meant this thing could create copies, could mimic not just voices but objects, physical things. It was learning me, studying me, preparing to become me. I grabbed the radio again, desperate. "Joseph, if you can hear this, I need extraction now. Something's wrong out here. Research Cabin 7. This is Conservation Base." Joseph's voice crackled through, clear and steady. "We read you. What's your status?" Relief flooded through me. "Joseph, thank God. I need you to come get me. There's something out here. It's been circling the cabin. It's mimicking." "Copy that, Derek. We're showing you made your check-in yesterday. Is there a problem with the research?" I froze. No, I didn't make a check-in yesterday. I tried, but the radio was dead. Silence on the other end. Then, "Derek, we have a recording. Want to hear it?" "Yes." What came through the speaker next was my voice, calm and professional. "Conservation Base. This is Research Cabin 7. Day 2 check-in. Weather holding, documentation proceeding normally. Wolfpack located and observed. No issues to report. Next check-in in 3 days." "That wasn't me," I said slowly. "Joseph, that wasn't me talking." Another long silence. "Derek, are you feeling okay? The isolation can affect people. If you need to come back early." "I'm not crazy. Something out here has been copying me, copying my voice, my wife. It killed the wolves, Joseph. Arranged them in a circle. There were symbols carved in the trees, bones arranged in patterns. You have to believe me." "Derek," Joseph's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm going to come check on you tomorrow, early. Can you hold on until then?" "Tomorrow? Why not today? Why not now? Storm moving in. Can't risk the snowmobile in whiteout conditions. First light tomorrow. I'll be there. Just stay inside. Keep the door locked. And don't answer if you hear voices. Okay?" "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." "And Derek, the elders have a saying, the hungry season makes copies of what it eats. If you see yourself out there, that means it's already tasted you. Don't let it finish the meal." The radio went dead. I spent that day fortifying the cabin, pushing furniture against the door, hanging pots and pans from the windows so anything trying to break in would make noise. Kept the wood stove burning hot, kept my knife close, and tried very hard not to think about what Joseph had said. Already tasted you. What did that mean? When had it tasted me? The temperature continued to rise throughout the day. By afternoon, it was 40 degrees outside, well above freezing. I could hear water running everywhere, snow melting off the roof, ice breaking up on the lake with sharp cracks that echoed like gunshots. The thaw was accelerating. Around 3 p.m., I saw movement on the lake. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on the distant figure. It was me. Another Derek, walking across the ice, heading toward the cabin. Same jacket, same gait, same posture. I watched in horrified fascination as it approached, moving with purpose but no apparent hurry. It stopped about 50 yards from shore, standing perfectly still on the ice. Then it raised one hand and waved at me. I stepped back from the window, heart hammering. The copy of me stood there for another minute, then turned and walked back the way it had come, disappearing into the tree line on the far shore. It was playing with me, showing me that it could be me, that it had learned me so completely that it could wear my shape like a coat. Night fell early, heavy clouds blocking what little sun had managed to break through during the day. The temperature dropped back below freezing, but not by much. The melting continued, slower now but still steady. The lake ice groaned and cracked in the darkness. Around midnight, Sarah's voice returned, but this time, it wasn't alone. "Derek?" Sarah called from outside. "Derek, I brought someone to see you." Then another voice joined hers, my mother's voice, dead for 10 years. "Derek, sweetheart, why won't you come out? We've missed you so much." And another, my college roommate, killed in a climbing accident. "Dude, come on. Party's out here. You're missing all the fun." More voices joined, one by one, building into a chorus. Friends, relatives, colleagues, all dead, all calling my name, all begging me to open the door and join them. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still hear them. The voices seemed to bypass my ears entirely, resonating directly in my skull. Then, cutting through all of them, Sarah's voice again, but different now, angry. "You let me die alone, Derek. Alone in that car, calling for you, and you didn't answer. Now I'm calling again. Are you going to ignore me again? Are you that much of a coward?" "You're not her," I shouted. "She never blamed me. She wouldn't say these things. Because she's DED, Derek. Dead and rotting in the ground while you keep living, keep working, keep pretending you've moved on. But you haven't, have you? You're so lonely, so guilty, so desperate for forgiveness." The door shuddered as something slammed into it from outside. Once, twice, 3 times, each impact harder than the last. The wooden bar cracked but held. "Let me in." The voice was no longer Sarah's, no longer human. It was something ancient and starving, something that had been waiting in the frozen ground for the warmth to wake it, to give it strength. The pots hanging from the windows began to swing wildly, clattering together in a chaotic rhythm. The cabin walls groaned. Outside, the sound of splintering wood, of something massive circling the structure, testing its defenses. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The silence was immediate and absolute. No voices, no footsteps, no impacts on the door. Just the crackle of the wood stove and my own ragged breathing. I waited, knife gripped in white-knuckled hands, watching the windows. Minutes passed. An hour. Then I heard it. A soft scratching sound from above, from the roof. I looked up at the ceiling, my stomach sinking. The cabin had a small attic space above the main room, accessible only through a narrow hatch in the ceiling. I checked it when I arrived, found it empty except for old trapping equipment and mouse droppings. The scratching continued, moving slowly across the roof, then stopping directly above the hatch. The hatch began to open. I scrambled backward, raising my knife. The hatch swung down, creaking on old hinges, revealing darkness above. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a face appeared in the opening. My face, but wrong. The proportions slightly off, the eyes too large, the mouth stretched into a smile that was too wide, too knowing. "Hello, Derek," it said with my voice. "I've been learning so much about you. Want to hear what I've learned?" It dropped down through the hatch with impossible grace, landing in a crouch. As it straightened, I saw that its body was wrong too. Limbs too long, joints bending at angles that made my eyes hurt to follow. "I've learned that you blame yourself for Sarah's death," it said, taking a step toward me. "I've learned that you think you don't deserve happiness, that you hide in empty places because you're afraid of hurting anyone else you might love." Another step closer. Its form seemed to flicker, shifting between my shape and something else, something skeletal and crowned with antlers. I've learned that you're tired, Derek. So tired of carrying all this guilt and grief. Wouldn't it be easier to just let go? To stop fighting? To let the hunger take you? Stay back, I warned, raising the knife. I'll use this. It laughed, and the sound was like breaking bones. That won't help you. I'm not really here, Derek. Not in the way you think. I'm in the thaw, in the warming earth, in the melting ice. I'm the hunger that wakes when the cold releases its grip. You can't stab hunger. You can't kill starvation. It lunged forward with shocking speed. I swung the knife wildly, felt it connect with something solid. The blade sank in deep, but no blood flowed. Instead, the wound opened like a mouth, revealing emptiness inside, a void so absolute it seemed to pull at my vision. The thing with my face grabbed my wrist, its grip impossibly strong and cold, so cold it burned. You've already invited me in, Derek. When you opened your heart to grief, to guilt, to all that self-destructive hunger, you made a space for me. Now I'm just filling it. It pulled me closer, and I could see its mouth opening wider and wider, the human face stretching and tearing like wet paper to reveal what lay beneath. Rows of teeth, jagged and sharp, leading down into darkness that went on forever. I screamed and threw my weight backward, breaking free. The thing stumbled, its form flickering again. For just a moment, I saw what it really looked like. The skeletal frame, the yellowed bones, the antlers spreading like dead branches from a skull that was almost human but not quite, had never been human, would never be human no matter how many shapes it wore. I grabbed the kerosene lamp from the table and hurled it at the thing. The glass shattered, fuel splashing across its torso. Then, I shoved a burning stick from the stove into the spreading pool. Fire erupted, climbing the thing's body with unnatural speed. It shrieked, a sound that shattered the cabin's windows, and fled back up through the attic hatch. I could hear it on the roof, moving fast, the sound of flames, and that terrible shrieking fading into the distance. I collapsed against the wall, shaking, as smoke filled the cabin. Small fires burned where the kerosene had splashed, but I managed to stamp them out before they spread. The rest of the night I spent huddled near the door, listening to the sounds outside, the ice on the lake breaking up, massive sheets grinding against each other, water running everywhere as the unseasonable thaw continued. And underneath it all, a sound that might have been wind through trees or might have been something else, something angry and wounded and still very, very hungry. Dawn came slowly, the sky pale and overcast. I heard the snowmobile before I saw it, the familiar whine of the engine growing louder. Joseph appeared through the trees, and I've never been so relieved to see another person in my life. He took one look at my face, at the broken windows, at the scorch marks on the floor, and nodded grimly. It came for you. How did you know? Because it comes every thaw, as for as long as anyone remembers. The elders call it Wendigo, the spirit of hunger and cold. During the deep freeze, it sleeps, trapped in ice and frozen earth. But when the warm comes early, when the ice breaks up before its time, it wakes. Why didn't you warn me properly? I asked, anger and exhaustion making my voice harsh. Would you have believed me? Would any scientist believe an old native man telling stories about winter spirits? He shook his head. I told you enough. Told you not to answer voices, not to go looking, but it finds ways, always finds ways. He helped me gather my essential equipment, leaving the rest. We need to go now. The ice in the lake is breaking up fast. Another day and the cabin will be cut off completely. As we loaded the snowmobile, I looked back at the cabin one last time. In the snow around it, I could see the tracks, dozens of different sets, different sizes, all my footprints. As if I'd spent the entire night circling the cabin, pacing endlessly, wearing down my own defenses. Joseph, I said slowly, if it was copying me, how do I know I'm really me? He met my eyes, his expression unreadable. You don't? And neither do I. That's the thing about the Wendigo. Once it tastes you, learns you, there's always a chance. He trailed off, then shook his head. But fire hurts it. That's real. That's something it can't fake. The fact that you fought back with fire, that's human. That's you. We rode back to civilization in silence. Behind us, the cabin grew smaller in the distance, lonely and violated on the shore of the breaking lake. The Wildlife Service closed the research station permanently a week later. Officially, the ice conditions made it too dangerous. Unofficially, Joseph told me they'd found things during the spring thaw. Bodies under the ice, preserved by the cold, some of them decades old. All of them arranged in patterns, circles and spirals, offerings to something that lived in the hungry season between winter and spring. I left Quebec and didn't return. Took a position studying desert ecosystems in Arizona, as far from winter as I could get. But sometimes, on cold nights, I still hear Sarah's voice calling to me. Still feel that overwhelming pull toward empty, frozen places. And sometimes I catch myself staring in mirrors, examining my reflection, looking for any sign that I'm not the original. That somewhere during those nights in the cabin, the real Derek died, and what came back was just a copy, a hunger wearing human skin, waiting for the next thaw. I like to think I'm still me, but the thing about copies is, they think they're the original too. If you made it to the end of this story, if you're sitting there wondering whether you'd survive an encounter with something that can wear your face and speak with your voice, I need you to do something. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me about the voices you've heard, the things that have called to you from dark places. And subscribe to hear more from people who face the things that shouldn't exist and somehow live to tell about it. Because these aren't just scary stories. They're warnings. They're survival guides. They're the truth about what's out there waiting in the spaces between civilization and wilderness. Stay safe. Keep the fire burning. And if you hear someone you love calling from the darkness, make absolutely sure you can see them before you answer. Because the thing wearing their face might know every memory, every secret, every word they would say. And by the time you realize it's not them, you've already invited it in. My son was screaming my name from inside the tent, but I was staring at my son standing 50 yards away in the trees, calling for help. I'm a hunting guide, have been for 15 years, working the mountains along the Montana-Alberta border, taking clients after elk, mule deer, and the occasional bear. It's honest work, hard work, and it taught me to read the wilderness the way some people read books. Every broken branch tells a story. Every track in the snow is a sentence. And after 15 years, I thought I'd read every story these mountains had to tell. I was wrong. My son's name is Ethan. He turned 16 in September, and for his birthday, I promised him something I'd been preparing him for since he was old enough to hold a rifle, his first big game hunt. Just the two of us, no clients, no schedule, no pressure. A week in the Bob Marshall wilderness during rifle season, tracking a bull elk the way my father had taught me, the way his father had taught him. It was supposed to be about tradition, about passing something down, about becoming a man. We drove up from Missoula on November 19th, my truck loaded with gear I checked and double-checked. Ethan barely slept the night before, too excited, too nervous. In the passenger seat, he kept going over his shooting fundamentals, mouthing the steps to himself, making sure he had everything memorized. "You're gonna do fine," I told him as we turned onto the Forest Service road. "We've practiced enough. You're ready." "What if I freeze up?" he asked quietly. "When I see one, what if I can't pull the trigger?" "Then we wait until you're ready. This isn't about the kill, Ethan. It's about the hunt, about learning to move through the wilderness with respect. The shot is just one moment in a much longer story." He nodded, but I could see the anxiety in his eyes. He wanted to make me proud, wanted to prove he could do this. We parked at the trailhead around 2 p.m., shouldered our packs, and started the 5-mile hike to the drainage where I'd scouted elk earlier that fall. The weather was perfect for hunting, cold but not brutal, low 30s with clear skies. Fresh snow from 2 days before covered the ground, ideal for tracking. The trail wound through dense lodgepole pine, crossing small creeks still partially frozen, climbing gradually toward the high country. Ethan kept pace well, his breathing steady despite the heavy pack. I taught him how to walk quietly, how to move through the forest without announcing his presence to every animal within a mile. We made camp in a small meadow I'd used before, a sheltered spot with good drainage and a clear view of the surrounding ridges. While Ethan set up our tent, I gathered firewood and marked our perimeter, hanging our food bags high enough to discourage any curious bears. "Dad," Ethan called as he finished staking the tent. "Look at this." I walked over to where he was pointing. Pressed deep into the snow near the edge of our campsite was a boot print. Recent, maybe a day old, the edges still crisp. "Another hunter," I said, examining it. "Probably moved through here yesterday or the day before." But something about it bothered me. The print was deep, indicating weight and a full pack, but there was only one. Not a trail of prints, not a path indicating someone had walked through. Just this single print, perfectly preserved, as if someone had taken one step and then, vanished? "Maybe they jumped from that rock," Ethan suggested, pointing to a boulder a few feet away. "Maybe," I agreed, though that didn't feel right either. "Come on, let's get camp finished before dark." We spent the evening sitting around a small fire, me telling stories about previous hunts, while Ethan listened intently. The temperature dropped steadily as night fell, our breath forming thick clouds in the firelight. Around us, the forest was quiet, that particular stillness that comes with cold weather and fresh snow. "You think we'll see one tomorrow?" Ethan asked, his voice hopeful. "If we're patient and quiet, probably. I saw sign all through this drainage last month. Big bull, at least 6 points, maybe more." "But Ethan," I paused, making sure he was looking at me. "If something feels wrong tomorrow, if your instincts tell you something's off, I want you to tell me immediately, okay?" "What kind of wrong?" "Any kind. The wilderness has rules, and when those rules get broken, it means danger. Could be a grizzly, could be weather moving in, could be anything. But trust your gut. That's part of what I'm teaching you." He nodded seriously. "I will." We turned in around 9 p.m., both of us warm in our sleeping bags inside the tent. I lay awake for a while, listening to Ethan's breathing slow as he drifted off to sleep. Outside, the night was silent except for the occasional crack of a tree contracting in the cold. Then, around midnight, I heard it, a voice calling from somewhere beyond our camp. "Help, please. Someone help me." It was a man's voice, distant and weak, coming from the direction of the drainage below us. I sat up carefully, trying not to wake Ethan, and listened. The call came again, more desperate this time. "Is someone there? Please, I'm hurt." I unzipped the tent quietly and stepped out into the frigid night air, my breath fogging immediately. The moon was bright enough to see by, casting everything in shades of silver and black. I scanned the tree line, looking for any sign of movement. "Hello?" I called back. "Where are you?" Silence, long enough that I started to think I'd imagined it. Then, "Down here, by the creek." I fell. Something about the voice made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The cadence was off, the words too evenly spaced, like someone reading from a script they didn't quite understand. I grabbed my flashlight and rifle, then hesitated. Every instinct I developed over 15 years in these mountains was screaming at me not to go looking, not to follow that voice into the darkness. "Dad," Ethan's voice came from behind me, groggy with sleep. "What's wrong?" "Stay in the tent," I said firmly. "Someone's calling for help, but just stay in the tent. Keep the rifle close. I'll be right back." "Should I come with you?" "No, stay here. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, you use the satellite phone and call for help. Understand?" He nodded, now fully awake and alert. I started toward the creek, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The forest felt different at night, familiar landmarks transformed into alien shapes. My boots crunched softly in the snow, each step measured and careful. "Where are you?" I called again. No answer this time. I reached the creek, a small watercourse, maybe 10 feet across, partially frozen. The snow around it was undisturbed except for... I paused, my light playing across something that made my stomach tighten. Tracks, boot prints leading to the creek edge, then changing. The prints on the far side weren't boots anymore. They were bare feet, impossibly large, with toes spread wide apart. And they didn't just cross the creek. They ran parallel to it, dozens of prints, as if something had been pacing back and forth, for hours. "Dad!" Ethan's voice, sharp with fear, cut through the night from back at camp. I ran, crashing through the underbrush, my heart hammering, burst into the clearing to find Ethan standing outside the tent, rifle raised, pointing toward the trees. "What happened?" I demanded, scanning the darkness. "Something called my name," he said, his voice shaking. "It sounded like you, but you were already gone." He was calling from over there. He pointed toward the opposite side of camp from where I'd gone. It kept saying, "Ethan, come here. I found something. Come here right now." I moved to his side, raising my own rifle. "You did good not going. That wasn't me." "I know," he whispered, "because it called me Ethan. You always call me E. Smart kid." I felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. "Get in the tent. We're staying put until daylight." We sat inside, both of us dressed and armed, listening to the night. For the next few hours, we heard things, footsteps circling the camp, branches breaking, and voices. So many voices. My wife, Lisa, calling for us to come home, Ethan's friends from school, my father, dead for 8 years, asking me to come help him. Each voice perfect, each inflection exactly right, but always coming from the darkness, always trying to draw us out. "What is that?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I lied, because I had heard stories, whispered around campfires by Blackfeet guides I'd worked with. Stories about the hungry season, about things that woke when the snow fell, things that learned your voice and your face and used them to hunt. Dawn came slowly, the sky lightening from black to gray to pale blue. The voices stopped as the sun rose, replaced by the normal sounds of the forest. Birds calling, wind in the trees, the distant sound of water running. We emerged from the tent cautiously, both exhausted from a sleepless night. The camp looked normal in daylight, almost peaceful, except for the tracks. All around our tent, in concentric circles, were footprints, human footprints, but wrong, too large, too widely spaced, sometimes showing 5 toes, sometimes showing claws. They circled our position dozens of times, never approaching closer than about 20 feet, as if testing an invisible barrier. "Pack up," I said quietly. "We're leaving." "But the hunt. Forget the hunt. Something's wrong here. We're getting back to the truck." As Ethan started breaking down the tent, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Leading away from our camp, heading deeper into the drainage, was a trail of boot prints. My boot prints, I recognized the tread pattern, but I hadn't walked that direction, hadn't left camp all night except to go to the creek. Whatever was out here had started copying me. We packed in record time, shouldered our gear, and started back toward the trailhead. I kept Ethan in front of me where I could see him, my rifle ready, constantly scanning the trees around us. We'd made it maybe a mile when Ethan stopped suddenly. "Dad, look." Ahead of us, visible through the trees, was another camp, tent still standing, fire ring with cold ashes, gear scattered around, but no people. "Hello?" I called. No answer. We approached carefully. The camp looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry. Sleeping bags still in the tent, food hanging in a tree, rifles propped against a log, but no sign of the hunters who'd set it up. Then I saw the tracks, the same pattern we'd seen at our camp, circles of bare footprints, growing larger as they spiraled inward, stopping at the tent entrance, and leading away, a single set of boot prints, heading deeper into the mountains. They followed it, I said quietly. Whoever camped here, they heard something, someone calling, and they followed it. Where did they go? Ethan asked. I didn't answer, because I knew where they'd gone. Into the wilderness, following voices that sounded like people they trusted, following copies of themselves, walking deeper and deeper into places they'd never come back from. We need to move fast, I said. Stay close to me. Don't respond to any voices except mine, and if you're not sure it's me, ask me something only I would know. We continued down the trail, moving quickly now, fear pushing us faster than was probably safe. But every instinct I had was screaming at us to get out, to put distance between us and whatever was hunting these mountains. Around noon, we found the second abandoned camp, then a third, all with the same pattern, circling tracks, gear left behind, boot prints leading away into the wilderness. How many hunters had come up here this season? How many had been lured away by voices wearing familiar faces? Dad, Ethan's voice was sharp. I heard something. I spun around. What? Down that way. He pointed to a side trail branching off the main path. Someone called my name. It sounded like Mom. It's not your mother. She's home in Missoula, 200 miles from here. I know, but it sounded so real, she said. Ethan, baby, come here. I need you. His eyes were wide, frightened. She only calls me baby when she's scared. The thing was learning not just voices but emotions, contexts, the exact words that would make us respond. How long had it been watching us? How much had it learned? Keep moving, I said. Don't listen. Don't look. Just keep moving. But the voices continued, following us down the trail. My father, telling me I disappointed him. Lisa, crying, begging us to come back. Ethan's little sister, saying she was lost and scared. Each voice perfectly rendered, each one designed to exploit our fears and our love. Ethan was crying now, tears running down his face, but he kept walking, kept following me. My brave, strong son, fighting against every instinct that told him to help, to respond, to turn toward those familiar voices. We were maybe 2 miles from the trailhead when I saw it. Standing in the middle of the trail ahead was Ethan. Same jacket, same posture, same backpack. He was facing away from us, standing perfectly still. I stopped so suddenly that the real Ethan bumped into me. Dad, what? He followed my gaze and went silent. The copy of Ethan turned slowly to face us. At first glance, it looked perfect, but as it turned, I saw the wrongness. The proportions were slightly off, limbs a bit too long, head tilted at an angle no human neck would naturally hold. It smiled, and the smile was all wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth. Hi, Dad, it said with Ethan's voice. Did you miss me? I raised my rifle, putting myself between it and my son. Stay behind me, E. The copy's smile widened further, impossibly further. That's not very nice. Don't you want to take me hunting? Isn't that why we're here? You're not my son, but I could be, it said, taking a step toward us. I've learned him so well. I know how he talks, how he thinks, what he's afraid of. I could be him better than he is. Wouldn't that be something? A son who never disappoints you, who never fails, who always makes you proud. Behind me, I heard Ethan's breath hitch. The thing was playing on his fears now, the anxiety he'd expressed in the truck about freezing up, about not being good enough. E, I said quietly, not taking my eyes off the copy. Remember what I told you last night about trusting your gut when something's wrong? Yeah, this is wrong. Every single thing about this is wrong. Do you trust me? Yes. Then when I say run, You run. Don't look back. Don't stop. Just run for the trailhead. Can you do that? I'm not leaving you." "Ethan Hayes," I said, using his full name, the voice I used when there was no room for argument. "You will do what I say. On 3, you run. 1. The copy of Ethan started moving toward us faster, its walk becoming something else, something predatory. 2. Its form began to shift, the human facade cracking like thin ice, revealing something underneath, something tall and skeletal, with limbs that bent the wrong way. 3. Run! Ethan ran. I fired. 3 quick shots center mass. The thing staggered but didn't fall. Instead, it screamed, a sound like metal tearing, like ice breaking, like hunger given voice. I turned and ran after Ethan, reloading as I moved. Behind me, I could hear it coming, dropping to all 4s, moving impossibly fast through the snow and trees. Ahead, I saw Ethan burst out of the tree line into the parking area. My truck was right there, 50 yards away. He reached it, yanked on the door. Locked. Of course locked. "Keys!" he shouted. I fumbled in my pocket as I ran, my fingers numb with cold and fear. Found them, threw them. Ethan caught them, dropped them, scrambled to pick them up. Behind me, close now, too close. I could hear breathing, not human breathing, something else. Ethan got the door open, dove inside. I was 20 yards away, 15, 10. The thing burst from the trees behind me. I spun, raised the rifle, fired my remaining rounds directly into its face. This time, it fell, but even as it went down, I saw its mouth open wide, wider than any mouth should go, and it spoke with my voice. "Ethan, help me. Don't leave me." I dove into the truck, slammed the door. Ethan already had the engine running. I threw it in reverse and gunned it, spraying gravel, not caring about anything except putting distance between us and that thing. We didn't stop driving until we reached Browning, the nearest town, nearly an hour away. Pulled into the parking lot of the tribal police station and just sat there, both of us shaking. Eventually, I went inside, told them everything, expected them to think I was crazy, that I'd lost my mind in the wilderness. But the officer who took my statement, a Blackfeet woman named Sarah Running Crane, just nodded calmly. "You're not the first this season," she said. "We've had reports, abandoned camps, hunters who went in and never came out. The elders say it's the Wendigo. They say it wakes up when the first snows fall and stays active until the deep freeze locks it away again." "Why isn't anyone doing anything?" I demanded. "Why isn't the Forest Service closing those areas?" "They are," she said quietly. Quietly. "Can't exactly tell people we're closing hunting areas because of monsters. But zones are being shut down, one by one, for environmental concerns and wildlife management. By next week, that whole drainage will be off limits. What about the other hunters, the ones who followed it?" She met my eyes, and I saw the answer there even before she spoke. "Search and rescue will do what they can when the weather permits. But if someone's been gone more than 48 hours in Wendigo country, we usually don't find them. Or if we do, we don't find anything that needs bringing back." They filed a report, took our statement, arranged for our truck to be checked for evidence, though I'm not sure what evidence could possibly explain what we'd seen. Lisa drove up from Missoula to get us. When she pulled into the parking lot and I saw her face, saw her real face with its familiar imperfections and the way she smiled that was uniquely hers, I started crying, held her and didn't let go for a long time. Ethan barely spoke for weeks afterward. When he did finally talk about it, he asked me one question. "Dad, how do you know I'm really me? How do you know it didn't get me somehow? That I'm not a copy?" I pulled him close, because a copy wouldn't be afraid of that question. A copy wouldn't doubt. That fear, that uncertainty, that's human. That's you. I don't guide anymore. Can't bring myself to take clients into those mountains, knowing what's up there, what's waiting for the next person to hear a familiar voice calling from the trees. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. My father's voice, my wife's voice, my own voice, calling to me from some dark place inside my head. And I wonder if maybe it did get a piece of me after all, if everyone who encounters it loses something, even if they make it out alive. Ethan turns 17 next month. He doesn't want a hunting trip, doesn't even want to go camping, and I don't blame him. Some traditions are better left broken, some lessons are better left unlearned. Because the wilderness has rules, and one of those rules is this: not everything that calls your name wants to help you. Not everything that looks like someone you love actually loves you back. And sometimes, the most dangerous hunt is the one where you're not the hunter. If this story made you think twice about answering when someone calls your name in the wilderness, if it made you wonder what might be watching from the trees during your next camping trip, do me a favor. Hit that like button and leave a comment telling me about the strangest thing you've ever heard in the woods. And if you want more stories from people who've survived encounters with things that wear familiar faces, go ahead and subscribe, because these aren't just campfire tales meant to scare you. They're warnings from people who've learned the hard way that not every voice calling from the darkness deserves an answer. Stay safe out there. Keep your loved ones close. And if you ever hear yourself calling from the woods, make absolutely sure it's really you before you follow. Because sometimes, the thing you're running from is already wearing your face, and by the time you realize it, there's no way to tell who's the original and who's the copy. I was reviewing my audio recordings from last night when I heard two voices having a conversation in my tent. Both of them were mine. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm an audio engineer specializing in nature sound recording. For the past 8 years, I've traveled to remote locations around the world, capturing pristine wilderness audio for documentaries, films, and sound libraries. I've recorded in the Amazon, the Serengeti, the Australian outback. I've sat motionless in the dark for hours, waiting to capture the perfect howl, the perfect silence, the perfect storm. I thought I understood what it meant to listen to the wilderness, to really hear it. I was wrong. The Algonquin Provincial Park assignment came through in early January. A Canadian nature documentary needed authentic winter wilderness audio, the kind you can't fake in a studio. They wanted wind through frozen trees, ice cracking on lakes, the particular quality of silence that only exists in deep winter, when snow dampens every sound and the forest holds its breath. I flew into Toronto on January 7th, drove north to the park, and arranged a backcountry permit for a week-long solo camping trip. The park rangers at the Westgate station were surprised anyone wanted to winter camp alone. "You experienced with cold weather?" the older ranger asked, looking at my permit application. "Oh, I've camped in worse," I said. "Recorded wolf packs in the Yukon last February. This is practically tropical compared to that. It's not the cold I'm worried about," he said, but didn't elaborate. Just stamped my permit and handed it back. Check in by radio every 48 hours, miss a check-in, and we come looking. I thanked him and headed into the park, snowshoeing along the frozen Lake Opiongo Trail. My sled carried everything I needed: a 4-season tent, cold weather sleeping bag rated to -40, a week's worth of freeze-dried food, and most importantly, my recording equipment. Professional-grade microphones, a portable recorder, batteries kept warm in insulated cases, and 6 remote audio units I could place throughout the forest to capture soundscapes from multiple locations simultaneously. The remote units were my pride and joy, custom-built devices that could record continuously for 72 hours, weather-sealed and camouflaged. I placed them in a grid pattern around my camp, creating a 3-dimensional audio map of the wilderness. Each unit time-stamped its recordings down to the second, and I could later sync them all together to create an immersive sound experience. I'd used this setup dozens of times before. It had never captured anything I didn't expect. I set up camp on the 3rd day, about 8 miles from the nearest trailhead, on a small rise overlooking a frozen creek. The location was perfect, sheltered from wind by dense spruce, good visibility in all directions, and the creek provided interesting acoustic properties as water still flowed beneath the ice. After establishing camp, I spent the afternoon placing my remote units, one north, one south, one east, one west, each about 100 yards out, and 2 more at intermediate positions. I marked each location on my GPS, tested the units to make sure they were recording, then returned to camp as the short winter day faded to darkness. That first night, I made dinner over my camp stove, listening to the forest settle into its nocturnal rhythm. The temperature dropped to -20 Celsius, cold enough that my breath froze instantly, forming ice crystals in my beard. I retreated into my tent around 8 p.m., set up my main recorder to capture any sounds during the night, and fell asleep to the absolute silence that only exists in deep winter wilderness. I woke at dawn, immediately checking my equipment out of habit. The main recorder showed 8 hours of continuous recording. I made coffee, ate breakfast, then began the process I followed every morning, collecting data from the remote units. I snowshoed to each location, downloaded the audio files to my laptop, then returned to camp to review the night's recordings. This was always my favorite part, listening to what happened in the forest while I slept. You'd be surprised what you can hear when humans aren't moving around, when you're patient enough to listen to the spaces between sounds. I started with the main recorder, the one I'd placed just inside my tent, put on my headphones, opened the waveform in my editing software, and hit play. At first, nothing unusual. The sound of my own breathing as I fell asleep, the rustle of my sleeping bag when I shifted position, the faint ticking of my watch. Normal sounds, expected sounds. Then, around 1:30 a.m. according to the timestamp, a new sound began. Footsteps in snow, soft, careful, circling my tent. I frowned, increasing the volume. Could have been an animal, maybe a fox or a wolf passing through, but the pattern was wrong, too measured, too deliberate. The footsteps continued for nearly 10 minutes, circling again and again, before stopping directly outside my tent. I could hear breathing now, slow and deep, right next to the thin nylon wall. Then I heard my own voice. "Marcus," it said quietly, "are you awake?" I jerked the headphones off, my heart suddenly racing. I definitely hadn't said that. I'd been asleep, but that was my voice, my exact tone and inflection, asking if I was awake. I put the headphones back on, hands shaking slightly. On the recording, the silence stretched out. Then my voice again, slightly louder. "Marcus, I know you can hear me. Why won't you answer?" A pause, then, "Fine, I'll wait. I'm very good at waiting." The footsteps resumed, moving away from the tent. Then nothing, just the sound of wind and my own sleeping breath for the rest of the night. I sat there staring at the waveform, trying to rationalize what I'd heard. Could have been another camper, someone playing a prank. But who would be out here in January, in -20 weather, in the middle of nowhere, and how would they know my name? Maybe I'd been sleepwalking, talking in my sleep, but I'd never done that before, and the voice on the recording was fully awake, fully conscious. I decided to check the remote units. Maybe they'd captured something that would explain it. I opened the file from Remote Unit North, the one positioned closest to the direction the footsteps had come from, synced the timeline to 1:30 a.m., and listened. Footsteps approaching from the north, slow, heavy, accompanied by strange clicking sounds, like branches breaking. The footsteps passed the microphone, heading toward my camp. Then, about 50 yards past the mic, they stopped. Silence for almost a minute. Then my voice, distant but clear. "Marcus, are you awake?" But there was something wrong with it. The pitch was slightly off, like someone had recorded me and was playing it back at the wrong speed, and underneath my words, I could hear something else. A low humming sound, almost subsonic, that made my teeth ache when I increased the volume. I checked the other remote units. Same timeline, different perspectives. Remote East captured my voice, calling from a different direction. Remote South picked up what sounded like multiple voices, all mine. having a conversation with myself about whether to wake me up or wait until morning. On remote west, I heard myself screaming. Not words, just raw screaming, full of terror and pain, lasting for nearly 30 seconds before cutting off abruptly. According to the timestamp, that had happened while the other units were recording my voice, calmly asking if I was awake. I ripped off the headphones, my breath coming fast and shallow. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. But I had it all recorded, time-stamped, verified across multiple independent units, placed hundreds of yards apart. Something had been in the forest last night. Something that could throw my voice, copy it, project it from multiple locations simultaneously. Something that had screamed with my voice while calling to me with that same voice from other directions. I grabbed the satellite phone from my pack, my hand shaking. I should call the park rangers, tell them. What? That something was mimicking me? That my recordings had captured the impossible? Before I could dial, I heard it, faint but unmistakable, coming from the forest to the north. My own voice, singing. It was a song my brother used to sing when we were kids, a stupid camp song we'd learned at summer camp 25 years ago. I hadn't thought about that song in decades. Hadn't sung it since before he died. James had killed himself 5 years ago. Depression, the family said. But I'd always felt guilty, like I should have seen it coming, should have done something. We'd been close as kids, but had drifted apart as adults. I'd been too busy with my career, too focused on my recordings and my travels. The voice in the forest was singing James's favorite verse, the one he always insisted on singing even though I told him it was stupid, and it was using my voice to do it. "Stop," I said aloud, my voice cracking. "Whatever you are, stop it." The singing continued, getting slightly louder, coming closer. I could hear footsteps now, crunching through snow, approaching from the north. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my main recorder and started recording, documenting everything. If something happened to me, maybe someone would find the evidence. "This is Marcus Webb," I said into the microphone, my voice shaking. "January 9th, approximately 09:30 hours. Something's in the forest. Something that's been copying my voice. It's approaching my position now from the north. I'm recording this in case I don't make it out." The singing stopped abruptly. The footsteps stopped. Silence fell over the forest, absolute and oppressive. Then, from directly behind my tent, my voice spoke. "That's a good idea, Marcus. Recording everything. I've been learning so much from your recordings. Did you know you talk in your sleep sometimes? You say James's name a lot. You apologize to him. Tell him you're sorry you weren't there." I spun around, but there was nothing behind the tent. Just trees and snow and emptiness. "How do you know about James?" I demanded. "I know everything about you, Marcus. I've been listening, learning. You're very good at listening, but you never think about what might be listening back. All those microphones you placed. You made it so easy for me to study you from every angle, to hear how you breathe, how you move, how you sound when you think you're alone." The voice was coming from multiple directions now, surrounding me. North, south, east, west, all speaking simultaneously but slightly out of sync, creating a dizzying echo effect. Every night I've been getting closer. Every night I've been learning more. And soon I'll know you so well that I can be you. Better than you are. Because I don't carry all that guilt and pain and loneliness. I'm just hungry for voices, hungry for names, hungry for what you are. I grabbed my pack and started throwing things inside. Sleeping bag, stove, whatever I could reach. I had to get out, had to get back to the trailhead, had to get away from whatever this thing was. "Running won't help," all the voices said together, perfectly synchronized now. "I've already tasted you, Marcus. I've been inside your tent, breathing your air, touching your things. I've learned your shape. Look." I turned toward the tree line to the east and felt my stomach drop. Standing between the trees, maybe 40 yards away, was me. Another Marcus, wearing the same jacket, same hat, same everything. It raised one hand and waved, the gesture perfectly matching how I wave. Then it smiled, and the smile stretched too wide, revealing too many teeth. "We could both be Marcus," it said with my voice. "Wouldn't that be nice? Two of us to share the guilt, two of us to apologize to James. Or maybe I could just be Marcus, and you could be the copy. Would anyone really know the difference?" I ran, abandoned the tent, most of my gear, everything except my pack with the recorder still running inside, crashed through the snow, running blind, just trying to put distance between me and that thing wearing my face. Behind me, I could hear it following, not running, just walking steadily, confidently. It knew it didn't need to hurry, knew the forest was on its side, knew I'd tire eventually, knew I had nowhere to go. I ran for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes before I had to stop, my lungs burning, legs shaking with exhaustion. Bent over, hands on knees, gasping for breath in air so cold it felt like knives in my chest. That's when I heard it, not behind me, ahead of me. My voice, talking to someone. I approached cautiously, following the sound, and found one of my remote units, Remote East. It was still recording, still time-stamping, still documenting everything. I pulled out my laptop, connected it, and downloaded the latest audio. What I heard made me want to vomit. For the past 3 hours, while I'd been sleeping and then fleeing, Remote East had captured conversations, multiple voices, all mine, talking to each other, arguing about the best way to become me, discussing my memories, my fears, my dreams, planning how to approach my family after they became me, what to say to make them believe, how to live my life better than I'd been living it. And underneath it all, that subsonic humming, growing louder with each passing hour. I checked the other remote units, accessing them wirelessly through my laptop. All of them showed the same pattern. Conversations in my voice, growing more complex, more detailed, more human with each recording. The thing was using my microphones to practice being me, rehearsing my life, getting ready for the performance. On Remote North, I heard it talking about James. I should have been there, my voice said. I should have answered his calls. I was so focused on my career, on my recordings, on being successful, that I forgot to be a brother. That's what Marcus thinks, isn't it? That's the guilt he carries? Another voice, also mine, responded. Yes, and that's why he'll open the door when we knock, when we show him James, when we promise him forgiveness. I pulled the headphones off, shaking. It was going to use my brother against me, use my guilt and grief as a weapon. I had to destroy the recordings, all of them. If it was learning from my audio, studying me through my own equipment, then I needed to destroy its teacher. I pulled Remote East from the tree, opened the waterproof case, and smashed the unit against a rock. The electronics shattered, circuits and batteries scattering across the snow. Then I checked my GPS and started moving toward the next unit. It took me 2 hours to find and destroy all 6 remote units, and with each one, I felt like I was erasing evidence. These recordings could have proved what happened to me, could have shown the world that something impossible existed in these woods. But keeping them intact meant giving it more material to study, more time to perfect its imitation. As I smashed the last unit, Remote West, I heard footsteps approaching from multiple directions. It wasn't just one anymore. It had made copies of its copy, or maybe it had always been multiple things, a pack of them, all learning to be me. I grabbed my pack and ran toward where I thought the trailhead was, my compass clutched in one shaking hand. The sun was setting, and I knew spending another night out here would be fatal. I had to make it back to civilization before dark. The voices followed me, calling from the trees, my voice, James's voice, my mother's voice, all of them asking me to stop, to rest, to let them help. The footsteps came from every direction, sometimes running, sometimes walking, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4. I burst out of the tree line onto the frozen surface of Lake Opiongo just as the last light was fading from the sky. The lake stretched before me, 3 miles of open ice between me and the ranger station on the far shore. I could see lights in the distance, warm and promising. I started across the ice, moving as fast as I dared. The surface was slick, treacherous, but it was open ground with nowhere for anything to hide, nowhere for them to ambush me from. Halfway across, I heard ice cracking, not under my feet, but behind me. I risked a glance back. They were standing at the shore, at least a dozen figures, all wearing my shape, all watching me cross. And standing among them, taller than the others, was something that didn't bother pretending to be human anymore. Something skeletal and crowned with antlers, with limbs too long and eyes that glowed yellow in the darkness. One of the Marcus copies raised its hand and waved. Then all of them turned and walked back into the forest, disappearing into the trees. They let me go. Or maybe they were just patient. Maybe they knew I'd carry them with me, their voices recorded in my memory, their words etched into my consciousness. I made it to the ranger station around 8 p.m., half frozen, delirious, babbling about voices and copies. They took me to the hospital in Huntsville, treated me for hypothermia and dehydration, kept me for observation while park rangers went to retrieve my equipment. They found my camp exactly as I'd left it, tent still standing, most of my gear intact. But every single piece of recording equipment was destroyed, smashed as thoroughly as if someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. The rangers assumed I'd done it myself, some kind of psychotic break brought on by isolation and cold. They never found the remote units I'd destroyed. When they checked the GPS coordinates I'd marked, they found only disturbed snow and fragments of electronics scattered across the ground, as if something had dug them up after I destroyed them and ground them to powder. The only recording that survived was the one in my pack, the one I'd been making when I ran. The park rangers gave it to me at the hospital, asked if I wanted it as evidence for my statement. I took it home, kept it for 3 weeks before I had the courage to listen to it. The audio starts with my voice saying I'm recording everything, documenting what's happening. Then it captures my flight through the forest, my ragged breathing, the crunch of snow under my boots. About 40 minutes in, you can hear me stop to rest, gasping for air. And then, clear as day, recorded by the microphone in my pack, you can hear another voice, James's voice, right next to me, so close he must have been standing inches away. "I forgive you, Marcus," he says softly. "I never blamed you, but you need to stop running, stop hiding in empty places, stop recording the world instead of living in it. That's what's really eating you alive, isn't it? Not me, you." Then silence, just my breathing, just the wind. I've listened to that section 100 times. There's no distortion, no sign it's been faked or manipulated. It's just James, my dead brother, speaking to me from beyond the grave, or something that learned to sound exactly like him. I don't do nature recording anymore. Don't go into the wilderness. Don't set up microphones. Don't try to capture the sounds of places where humans don't belong. Because I understand now that listening is a two-way street. When you put a microphone in the forest, you're not just recording the wilderness. You're teaching it to hear you too. And some things in the wild are very, very good students. I still have that final recording. It's on a hard drive in my closet, encrypted, password protected. Sometimes late at night I think about listening to it again, checking to see if I missed something, if there's some clue I didn't catch the first 100 times. But I never do, because I'm afraid of what else I might hear, what other conversations might be buried in the background noise, what other voices might have been recorded while I was running for my life. And I'm especially afraid that one day I'll listen to it and hear myself talking, and won't remember saying any of those words. If you've made it to the end of this story, if you're sitting there thinking about all the times you've recorded yourself or been recorded, wondering what might be listening when you hit that record button, do me a favor, hit the like button, leave a comment, tell me I'm not crazy, tell me I'm not the only one who's heard things in recordings that shouldn't be there. And if you want more stories from people who've learned the hard way that the wilderness doesn't just watch you, it studies you, go ahead and subscribe, because these stories aren't entertainment. They're warnings, they're lessons written in terror and survival, and they might just save your life someday. Stay safe out there, keep your recordings short, and if you ever hear your own voice saying things you don't remember saying, maybe don't listen too closely. Because some words, once spoken, can never be unheard, and some voices, once learned, can never be forgotten. The forest is always listening. The question is, what's it learning?